Okie dokie. Big Reginald here. I thought it might be fun to go through the NuOgryn Talent tree as it has been reworked and is finalized. There won't be any further changes from this point on, so you can trust whatever's in this guide to be what gets released tomorrow. So we're going to go through this all together. Now, the tree rework has been out mostly for a little while already, but if you haven't seen it, this video is for you. If you have seen it, I mean, it's changed only a little, a few updates, but you're mostly not going to get anything new out of this. But if you would like someone to just walk through the tree for you so that you know what's going on in it, I'm happy to do so. I'm going to leave sort of a build that I've been using up here. I'm still experimenting. I think we're all going to have to experiment a lot. So the big changes here are the general structure of the tree. At the top are all of the general toughness and utility nodes that you've come to expect. In the middle is the blitzes. They've been broken out so that you can take any blitz with any of the tree components. That's really nice. Then there's a nice little mid-utility section, which there's a lot of really good choices in. From here, we get into our main abilities. And then from there, you get into these nice little conical mid-sections where you get your auras, okay? From there, it's going to go down and you get a nice cross-linkable, a nice bottom section with keystones. These are able to be dipped into, even if you run down all the way into one keystone, you're usually able to force something from some of the path in another keystone. Ogryn feels a lot more flexible. There's a lot more play styles, and I think you're going to find this very good. So let's kind of go through it now. Starting from the top, on the left-hand side, we have Linchpin, which is 50% coherency, toughness, regeneration. Furious, which is for each enemy hit during the same melee attack, you gain 2.5% damage on your next melee attack. On the right-hand side, we have Steady Grip. This is a huge toughness regen at 12.5% toughness while bracing your ranged weapon. This is really impressive and is a great way to get passive toughness when you need to dip around a corner quick before you go back in for some sort of melee assault. Towering Presence, 50% coherency radius. And then in the center triangle. Heavyweight, 30% damage against bulwarks, crushers, plague ogrins, and reapers. Also receive 30% damage reduction against the same. I pretty much always take this. Smash 'em replenishes 5% toughness after hitting a single enemy with a melee attack. This is increased to 15% toughness if it is a heavy attack, so this now applies to light attacks, basically. The best defense is the same. It's 5 for lights or specials, and 15 for heavy melee attacks. There is a central node of plus 25% toughness, but that toughness has been rolled into the tree where it used to be 2 nodes. In the blitzes section, we have an unmodified frag bomb. That's the centerpiece. On the right-hand side, we have bombs away. This is as it was, but there is a new node that enhances it, adding plus 3 grenades. These detonate in volleys, so you'll throw this, and 9 grenades are going to pop out if you have the upgrade, and it's going to detonate in groups of 3. This is a pretty big, essentially stagger tool. It also carries an additional charge now. It's 3 as opposed to 2 as before, and so it can be used to do some direct damage, but then it also deals a lot of grenades for a lot of stagger and AoE damage effects, and this is pretty handy as essentially Ogryn's stun grenade. The most fun and most interesting of these blitzes is the big friendly rock. You can toss a big rock or hunk of junk at a single enemy, reduced effectiveness against carapace armored enemies and unyielding enemies, however. You picked up a new rock every 45 seconds and can hold up to 4 rocks at a time. If you take the new little node modifier for this blitz, that one didn't count. The big friendly rock replenishes a charge if you hit a weak spot or hit no enemies. This is on a 5-second cooldown, however. Something I want to note about the big friendly rock is the usage time is a lot faster. Pulling it out and hucking this sucker is way easier and way faster than it was, and it makes it a much better competitor compared to the knife from before. I think you'll enjoy using this a lot better. It's a really solid offhand weapon for any build now, and I really like taking it. Number 10. Okay, then we go back into a grouped node. Toughness damage reduction, 10%. This is nice. It already combines with your default base toughness damage reduction, so you're really sitting around with a pretty sizable damage reduction by default. From here, we get into that middle utility node section. There's a lot of really good stuff in here, so we're going to go through the left side first. Soften them up is a common node to take. Enemies damaged by your melee attacks take 15% more damage for 5 seconds from all sources, so this is pretty nice. Pumped up, 50% damage resistance, while above 75% stamina. So this is a stamina tool node that you can use to play with stamina for Ogryn. In the center of that little side angle, we have Focused Fighter, plus 4% damage resistance from melee attacks on successful melee attack. Stacks 5 times. Stacks are removed upon taking damage from a melee attack. I've been testing this out. I'm not entirely sure about it. I think I'd probably run Pumped Up instead, or maybe Strongman instead here. Strongman, 10% damage resistance on elite kill or special kill, lasts 5 seconds. Payback time, 15% damage for 5 seconds after a successful dodge or being hit by an attack. This is basically Duelist for Ogryn, and it is pretty strong. It's really hard not to take this node, but there's a lot of really good nodes right now, and I'm still not sure what to take. Keep shooting, plus 15% reload speed when reloading on an empty clip. None of the guns Ogryn have clips, so this is probably empty magazine. Can't hit me again. 20% damage resistance versus ranged damage for 2.5 seconds after getting hit by a range attack with a 4-second cooldown. So basically, you get half the uptime of the cooldown. However, you do get really nice damage resistance against ranged attacks just kind of on the fly. And this is really nice for Ogryn since he does suffer from a large hitbox. There's a 5% toughness damage reduction node on the left and a plus 15% toughness node on the right. I have built builds where I just grab this 15 toughness node because it is pretty handy to get that extra toughness out of your Ogryn. Okay, now we're into the main abilities area. So, Indomitable is Indomitable. The main important detail for Indomitable that has been added is that you now get a dodge state when using Indomitable. This makes it the same as FOTF. You can just rush into a pile of shooting gunners, knock them all over, and then start slaying. Indomitable went, by just this change alone, from being a pretty impressive ability to being an absolute incredibly powerful ability. Being able to charge in with immunity to gunners and knock them all over is super great. It feels great. It finally has the utility that it needs. A Stomping Boots provides 10% toughness per enemy hit with Indomitable, which gives you enough toughness back in most cases to give you a lot of utility out of this ability as well. And then we have Trample and Pulverize, both of which do what they did before. However, I will say that Pulverize, the 5 stacks of bleed on enemies hit by Indomitable, is no longer as interesting to me as it once was because I'm no longer leveraging Delight and Destruction the way I had to before. I am now experimenting with not taking Delight and Destruction, and we'll get to that. Okay, let's go to our next ability, Loyal Protector. Loyal Protector has been updated a little bit more. All of us really felt that Loyal Protector was just a little on the shabby side after some of the other changes, and we can now see that we can see that it gets a pulse effect. So Loyal Protector taunt enemies within 12 meters, that's a big radius, making them attack only you for 15 seconds. The effect repeats after 3 seconds and after 6 seconds, so there's a couple of pulses of this ability. It has a 45-second cooldown. There are subnodes here that have been changed. No Pain, Loyal Protector, and its repeats replenish 10% toughness and an additional 0.5% toughness each 1 second per enemy affected up to 10% for 3 seconds. So if you affect a lot of enemies, you can get 20% toughness on pulse for 3 seconds. This is a pretty big sustain advantage for this ability, and I'm very interested in exploring how it plays in Havoc. Go Again still provides staggering, and enemy replenishes 2.5% of your cooldown for Loyal Protector, so you can use it more. And Valuable Destruction provides you that 25% base damage from all sources to taunted enemies. Finally, Point Blank Barrage. This automatically swaps and reloads your ranged weapon. You have a 25% rate of fire, 65% reload speed, 50% reduced brace, movement speed penalties, and gain 15% closed ranged damage for the next 10 seconds with an 80-second cooldown. Bullet Bravado. While Point Blank Barrage is active, you replenish 2% toughness for every shot fired and 10% toughness on each reload. Light 'em Up has been adjusted a little bit downwards here. You now apply 4 stacks of burn while Point Blank Barrage is active to a maximum stacks of 16. Hail of Fire gives you 50% rending and 15% damage to your range attacks while Point Blank Barrage is active. Okay, let's move on to some secondary nodes, this sort of conical section here in the middle. We'll go for the left side first. There's a rending boost. You just get 5% rending on Ogryn if you go this way. Additionally, you can get Beat Them Back. This is 15% melee damage on successful heavy melee attack. It lasts for 5 seconds, and it favors that sort of heavy attack strategy that Ogryn is sort of famous for. Speaking of which, Crunch is right under this node. Crunch has been adjusted and is basically budget thrust. You get up to 15% bonus damage and 30% impact bonus to your charged melee attack based on your charge time. So it is budget thrust now and is pretty decent as a utility node. And I've been trying it out with a knife to combine crunch and thrust together. Strike True is on the other side of the cone. It gives you 10% melee weak spot strength. This is strength, which is the old power stat, which means it is cleave, damage, and stagger. Okay, so it's quite noticeable when you have it or don't have it, and I've been playing around with having it and not having it. Batter is underneath that, so you're going to be getting that bleed on +2 stacks for light attacks or any special attack like the slap or the punch, and 4 on heavy attacks, as was previously the case. Bonebreaker's Aura gives you 10% melee attack damage for you and allies in coherency. And then there's a 10% melee damage boost node right under all that conical stuff. Let's go back to the cones. Slam, 25% impact bonus on melee attacks. Staggering an enemy with a melee attack replenishes 5% stamina, 1 second cooldown. That's pretty cool. That stamina increase can make Ogryn much more sustainable in combat, especially if you're using things like no pushover and doing various kinds of shoves. Brutish Strength gives you 4% stacks of brittleness on push, which gives you utility for that stamina. Simple-Minded, 30% corruption resistance. This might be useful in some niche circumstances, but you definitely don't have to take it. Let's go to the other side of the cone. For the little uns, come on, it's basically a meme at this point. On ally getting toughness broken, gain plus 10% strength, that's damage, cleave, and stagger, and 25% toughness damage reduction for 10 seconds on a 30-second cooldown. On an ally getting knocked down, gain stun immunity, 25% respite, and 25% revive speed for 10 seconds. Now, I haven't tried this one much, but I know people who have, and they've said it's not super impactful. You don't really notice it very much, but I could see it being valuable in a certain playstyle, and it could be a lot of fun. So I think it's worth investigating further. The jury is definitely out on this one. Unbreakable. Your perfect blocks can block all melee attacks. On perfect block, gain 20% melee damage on next attack. This looks pretty sick and gives Ogryn additional tools in his kit to manage certain enemy incoming attacks. Like if you get stuck on a bunch of crushers and small dudes at the same time, this could be your salvation. Stay Close is the aura node here. 15% toughness replenishment for you and allies in coherency. Now, this is toughness replenishment, and that means all sources. So anyone who's getting toughness from anywhere can gain additional toughness. And I think this could be very strong in some compositions. All right, now, if you're going down the right-hand conical side, which you can really only get to if you're running Point Blank Barrage or Loyal Protector, you're going to be running into Reload Boost, which gives you 5% reload speed. And otherwise, you'd have to path in this cone by going horizontally across all the other cones. So you're going to really have to fight for it. But you get an increased ammo stash by 25%. That's not nothing and fairly worthwhile. You can also select Big Boom, but only if you're coming down the path from the top. This will increase the explosion radius by 27.5% for your explosions. This would be huge for Rumbler. It will be huge for your grenades. It won't be that important most of the time, however. Fire Away is really interesting, which is that your explosions apply 1 stacks of burn, 2 stacks if in close range, max stacks of 8. I could see this being really nasty on Rumbler for maxing out your fire stacks when using Point Blank Barrage. It could also be really nasty for combining with bleed stacks on Rumbler, and so you could get a lot of dots off of Rumbler, for example, that you would otherwise not be able to get. I'm not sure how it plays with Gauntlet. It'll require some investigation on my part, and I haven't had a chance to play every single node. Coward Calling. 20% damage against suppressed enemies for you and allies in coherency, 25% suppression dealt. And there is Concentrate on the left-hand side, which is 60% sway reduction, 20% spread reduction, and 15% recoil reduction while bracing your ranged weapon, but you lose 0.5% stamina per second. But you lose 0.5 stamina per second while doing this. So it's kind of like Deadshot, but it's more about accuracy rather than critical hits. Okay, so we've cleared through all of those conical aura sections. As you can see, there's a ton of really interesting blue nodes to choose from now. Ogryn is really quite a glut of points. I'd like to just, before I get into this section on the Keystones area, just say, most of my issue with figuring out Ogryn at this point is figuring out where to stick my points because I want more things than I can have. It certainly doesn't feel like Zealot where I want mostly the same things every time. Right now, I'm really not sure what's best. I'm sure that will boil down eventually and we'll more or less know what the best nodes are, but it feels right now like there's a ton of nodes worth picking. Okay. Again, I've got some stuff here that I'm playing with in my builds right now. I've been trying different stuff out, but we're just going to read all the nodes. So we're starting with that 10% melee node I mentioned before. We're going to go down the left side. Too Stubborn to Die gives you 100% toughness replenishment while below 33% health. This could be really strong and allow you a lot of safety using toughness gating technology. Implacable will provide 15% damage reduction while charging melee attacks. And No Stopping Me is the real winner here, with becoming uninterruptible while charging heavy melee attacks and removing 100% of heavy melee attack movement speed penalties. This does indeed literally mean that you can sprint while charging a heavy attack, and it feels awesome. I've got this on my cleaver right now, and I'm just like running in while with a fully charged heavy attack and slapping something with a big cleaving blow, and it feels sick. So I think this will be a lot of fun, especially on slightly faster weapons, but also on slower weapons like the pickaxes, where those big swings hit hard. Okay, going down the right side now, and then we'll touch on the center. Frenzied Blows, 2.5% melee attack speed on change to hit for 5 seconds, stacks 5 times. This has a big impact that you can really notice, especially when you combine it with the heavy hitter Keystone, which also has an attack speed bonus. Dominate, 10% rending for 10 seconds on elite kill. Basically the same as it was before, still a really good node. Rending is awesome, especially if you're applying dots, but since this build I wasn't, I didn't take it in this particular build. It can be strong in a lot of circumstances, and I'm still playing out with whether or not I like it in all my builds. It's a work in progress. Bash and Blast. This is kind of your like weapon specialist-y flipping between weapons keys like item here. 2.5% range damage on melee kill, lasts 8 seconds, max stack 6. So you can stack up a bunch of this and then use it to do more ranged damage. It does, in my testing, appear to work for rock. So if you take rock and take this, you can actually have your rock do more damage, though your rock will one-shot most of the targets you're going to throw it at anyway, so I don't know how valuable that is. Now we'll go down the center. Delight and Destruction. Same as it always was. 8% damage resistance per bleeding enemy in melee range, stacks 4 times. You get a bunch of damage resistance if you take bleeding attacks or the thing from Indomitable Stomping Boots, I think, but I'm open. It's really not as required as it used to be. I think honestly, there's a lot of other DR in his kit now that you don't have to take this anymore, and you can run with other stuff. So I'm very interested to see Ogryn builds as they evolve once this goes live, because I think people are going to start trying new stuff very frequently. Okay, let's look at the Keystone itself. Heavy hitter, 3% melee damage for 7.5%. 3% melee damage for 7.5 seconds on melee attack hit, stacks 8 times. Gain 2 stacks on heavy attack hit. So it works for lights and heavies, and it gives you melee damage, just base. All right, let's look at the left-hand node here. Don't feel a thing. Heavy hitter also grants 1.5% toughness damage reduction for each stack. So again, I'm talking about DR here. Here's a source of DR to get based on heavy hitter. And honestly, this is a very similar conditional because bleeding enemies near you and hitting stuff in melee are the same, right? Just getting started, while heavy hitter is at 8 stacks, gain 10% attack speed. This is combined with frenzied blows to give you a lot of attack speed. Feels really good on cleaver in my opinion. Okay, right hand side, unstoppable. Heavy hitter also grants 15% toughness replenishment from melee kills for each stack. So you get more replenishment from killing stuff in melee. I see this as valuable, but I'm not sure that's more valuable than damage reduction. I am not sure which of these two nodes to pick right now with the different weapons I've been trying. The left-hand side is great cleaver. You get 15% cleave for each stack of heavy hitter. Remember, this stacks up to 8 times. So you stack this to 8. What is that? Hold on. So that is 120% cleave. So in theory, if you're running a weapon with low cleave or even with high cleave, like, I don't know, like the cleavers, you can just not take Savage Sweep and get the same advantage just by taking this Keystone. I think this is really interesting. It does lock you out of, however, Impactful, which gives you 10% impact for each stack, and that's 80% additional impact, which can make a lot of your weapons, including the cleavers, get some really interesting stagger breakpoints. So it's kind of a toss-up for me on which of these is better, and I think we really have to investigate which of these is the stronger combination of blessings and perks to get the most out of different weapons. There's a lot to learn. Okay, let's do the middle section here. This is the old Feel No Pain Keystone section. There's still a lot of really good stuff in here. So on the right, accessible from either tree really is Bruiser. 100% ability cooldown regeneration for 3 seconds after you or an ally in coherency kills an elite enemy. This still scales really well at higher difficulties, but it's regeneration speed, not just reduction. So it doesn't just like yoink down your ability so that you can just massively like get it again really fast like you did before. You're going to have to kind of It speeds things up, but not as fast as it did before. So it's definitely a nerf to the ability. And you could potentially argue that you don't even need to take it anymore, but I still think it's really strong. So I'm taking it now. Left-hand side, Attention Seeker. Blocking or pushing enemy taunts them for 8 seconds. This really is like the most powerful with the shield, where you can taunt ranged enemies and get them to come rush you in melee, specifically shooters. So I think mostly I don't take this unless I'm running a shield. Center node, Dedicated Practice, 20% weapon swap speed. I don't think this is required in all cases for Ogryn. It does apply to Rock, and I haven't tried Rock without it so far because I really like the heavy stubber, single stubbers, and this makes their swap speed feel so much better. You didn't, like, it was already fast enough, and now it feels really snappy. So I think this is a big deal. No pushover. Your pushes have 250% stagger and can only trigger once every 8 seconds. This is a very strong ability that gives you a ton of control. You can shove open bulwarks with this very easily. So I think there's a lot of value here. Also, I hate bulwarks. Get Stuck In is still a strong ability. It provides you with the following. On activating your combat ability, you and your allies in Coherency gain 20% movement speed and are also immune to stuns and suppression for 4 seconds. This is pretty valuable for anyone on the team, and not taking it kind of hurts, but there's so many good nodes that I felt that this was probably the weakest one since it's the most conditional buff. Okay, Center Point. No Hurting Friends. 2.5% strength on damage taken by you or allies in Coherency. 5 max stacks, lasts 10 seconds. 15% toughness damage reduction on max stacks. So if you guys are taking damage, you suddenly gain a bunch of advantage for dealing damage and swing that fight back around in your own favor. This is strength flat out, which means it applies to range as well. So if you guys are all getting shot, you're all taking damage, and this should be health damage, by the way, then you can actually turn a fight around in your favor with the amount of damage that you can suddenly output because of this. I'm not sure it's a great ability, but I'm very interested in trying it out some. Hard Knocks. Enemies staggered by your melee attacks take 15% more melee damage for 5 seconds. So there's a lot of sources in this tree, as you can see from above, that allow you to do shoves, staggers, and attacks that allow you to get a ton of extra like vulnerability effects on the enemy. So there's some real debuff opportunities here in this middle tree. Finally, Won't Give In on the right-hand side, 20% damage reduction for each knocked down or incapacitated ally within 20 meters. And then we'll get into the Keystone. Feel No Pain. You are blessed with 10 stacks of Feel No Pain. Each stack grants 2.5% toughness replenishment and 2.5% damage reduction. Taking damage removes 1 stack. Stacks are restored every 3 seconds. Pained Outburst has been improved so that you don't have to lose all of them. You have to lose half of your stacks. Once you reach 5 stacks or below, you push back enemies and replenish 50% toughness. This can occur every 30 seconds. Toughest. Feel No Pain grants 2.5% toughness replenishment per stack. Strongest. Pushing enemies restores 1 stack of Feel No Pain. This one's basically required in my opinion since pushing is so fundamental to the rest of the kit anyway, and it allows you to keep your stacks high, which is what you generally want, unless you want to use Pained Outburst for some reason. Overall, I feel like Feel No Pain is kind of the loser compared to Heavy Hitter right now, but I think there's still potentially a use case for it, at least in High Havoc. It'll require some testing. Let's go to the right-hand side for the Final Burst Limiter Override Keystone. Ranged damage boost is at the top node here, and then we're going to get to the left side. Pacemaker, hitting 3 or more enemies with a single attack of any kind apparently, grants 15% reload speed on your next reload. Pretty useful. Reloaded and Ready, 15% range damage for 8 seconds on a reload. This is going to, of course, apply most strongly to the Rumbler and Kickback, but will still be useful for other weapons as well. Spray and Slay, 50% melee damage and 7.5% melee attack speed for 6 seconds after emptying your clip. So this could be very good, especially for weapons with low magazine capacity, like, I don't know, the Rumbler with 1, to get melee damage and a melee attack speed into your Gunlugger Ogryn so that he can still do his job a little bit in melee without having to rely on ammunition consumption all the time. Unstoppable Momentum, 20% movement speed for 3 seconds on ranged kill. Massacre, killing an enemy grants 1.5% critical chance for 12 seconds, stacks 8 times. Lucky Streak, 15% critical strike damage. So this is a big buff to the damage on critical hits and can be pretty strong for some things, but Ogryn has kind of bad crits in general, so I'm not sure how useful this is going to actually be. Mobile emplacement, you take 20% reduced damage while bracing a ranged weapon. So if you combine this 20% reduced damage with the brace talent for generating toughness, this is probably a really easy way to gate your toughness and just make you really sturdy while firing fully automatic weapons. I can imagine this being fairly strong even in higher Havoc games, so you could probably face tank a lot. Burst limiter override. 15% chance of triggering Lucky Bullet and not consuming ammunition when making ranged attacks. In addition, gain 2% ranged damage on ranged kills. Max stacks 10, lasts 10 seconds. So you get up to 20% range damage, and you get a critical chance for when consuming and not consuming ammo when you're using burst limiter override. Let's talk about some other stuff. Back off. On a killing melee attack, gain 10% chance to trigger Lucky Bullet on the next shot, and this stacks 10 times. So this is kind of like Weapon Specialist, where you can queue up an automatic critical, except in this case it would be just Lucky Bullet, a free shot, by doing melee damage. I haven't tested this, but I guess in theory you could just like kill a bunch of stuff in melee and then fire free Rumbler shots forever. Like, do you have infinite Rumbler ammo with this? Well, it requires testing. I'm looking forward to. Good shooting. The shot that triggers Lucky Bullet is a guaranteed critical if it hits. So this is where you could combine with Lucky Streak and get a lot of crits out of your weaponry. That could be interesting. It remains to be seen if it will be valuable enough to take. We'll have to see. Maximum firepower, 100% ability cooldown reduction for 4 seconds when Lucky Bullet triggers. This could be good. You can combine this with Bruiser and get a lot of ability cooldown and have BLO or have PBB up all the time. I don't know. Worth trying. Heat of Battle. Burst limiter override also grants 1.5% fire rate per stack, so you get to fire more, I guess. Bullet Storm. 50% range damage to you and allies in coherency on Lucky Bullet. Lasts 8 seconds. Now this could be interesting as a team-wide buff to your veterans to help them do more damage in the game as a sort of support selection. I think this Keystone is looking pretty interesting right now. I'm not saying it's great, and it does require some testing, but I don't know. I would want to try it, I guess. That is the whole reworked Ogryn tree. Thanks for tagging along for this quick sort of review of all the nodes and just a few stray thoughts of mine. I have not had a chance to put the whole tree through its paces. I think that should be fairly obvious because it's a big tree. There's a lot to learn. So I'm really excited to see how the meta around this tree develops in the future. I know everybody's going to have creative ideas and be putting together new little tricks and ideas and concepts and trying things out over the next little while. We're all going to get together and figure out what's good and what's bad. And then as we figure out what's bad, hopefully there isn't much, we'll be able to make some recommendations on what could be changed in the future as well. So I will say that as a updated pass, I'm really excited because there's just so many more options. I feel really like enticed into selecting lots of different blue nodes here. And I'm always feeling like I'm running out of points before I can get everything that I want, but I'm always able to get into like the main things that I want in a build concept like the Keystone, right? So, and a couple of like the key nodes, like I can take Bruiser and still take this Keystone, and it feels like it's got the right amount of give and take. It's definitely a lot less top heavy than it used to be, and more bottom heavy with more options. So I'm really excited about that. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's builds and information and concepts as we go along. Tune in. I will be doing more Ogryn stuff as the day goes on. I've got a bunch of videos I'm trying to put together. So catch you around. Thanks so much for watching. Warm regards.
Reginald.
I would like to take a moment to express my genuine and significant gratitude to Bonehead for becoming my first Oath Taker level member. Your support really does mean a lot to me and has made it so much easier for me to continue to justify the amount of effort I pour into this channel. I'd also like to thank Miles Williams Lewis, Joseph Davison, Shackleford, and McSpan for supporting my channel through my Adept level membership. Your atypical support really means a lot to me, and I appreciate it. I'd also like to extend a thank you to the rest of my members. The support helps the channel a lot. If you would like to become a member of this channel, there is a link in the description below and a join button next to the subscribe button. Thank you all so much for visiting. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.